Hi, I'm Marcus with the IndieMusicLab.com. So today I'm going to share 3 things you can start doing today to make your chord progressions sound more appealing. The first 2 tips are focused on creating interesting colors that make your chord progressions stand out. And the third tip is a bit of a sneaky one that might seem unrelated, but I promise it's not. So here we go. Let's dive in and make our chord progressions better. Now, if you end up enjoying this video and you find it helpful, then I want to direct you to my website. It's called the IndieMusicLab.com, and you find a bunch more incredible resources to help your music making self. All right, here we go. Tip number 1 to write better chord progressions is use what I call the sustained note technique. So what I call the sustained note technique makes your chord progressions go from sounding like this to this. The second version was much more colorful and interesting, right? And guess what I changed? 1 note. So in order to achieve this technique, all you need to do is pick a singular note and sustain that and play that throughout the entirety of the chord progression. No matter what underlying chord is happening, that note stays consistent. Now with this chord progression that I just showed you, I was sustaining the 5, which we're in the key of A major, right? So this is a 6-5-3-4 chord progression. So instead of doing that, I'm sustaining the 5th note of the A major scale, which is this note right here. So instead of this, it goes like this because, hey, I'm sustaining this note. It's playing throughout. It's this E. Playing the entire time. Another note that I love to sustain is the 3rd note of the major scale. So let's stay in the key of A major, and so that would be the C sharp, right? The C sharp. So we're going to sustain that, so that could sound something like this. It glues it together, right? You're not jumping around like... No, it's... And it's actually easier to play than jumping around, but it sounds and feels more sophisticated. Now, a big reason why I love this sustained note technique so much is because this gets you out of the headspace of thinking like, okay, I'm going to play a 9th chord, then a suspended chord, then a major 7 chord. It gets you out of that space, and it says, no, let me simplify this. We're going to play 1 note that sustains, and then we're going to have the chord progression do its thing as the underlying progression, but that sustained note stays there the whole time, no matter what the chords, no matter what chord is playing. That automatically creates 9th chords and suspended chords and 7th chords. You see where I'm going with this? This is such a beautiful hack that shoots you to the front of the line without having to be analytical, and you can think more creatively and not have to think, oh, I'm going to do a major 7 chord here and yada, yada, yada. This is so much more efficient and so much more effective, so I highly recommend you try this out. Tip number 2 to write better chord progressions is experiment with these 2 alien chords. Oh my god, I am so sorry. I wrote an apology here. How can you accept it? So as not to be derogatory towards these extraterrestrial chords, I hereby refrain from ever using the term alien to describe these chords ever again. My demigod, I implore thee to forgive me of my sin. Okay, now I'm calling these chords alien chords because both of them have a note that is outside of the typical major scale. What's so cool about these chords is it almost feels like you're making a temporary key change, and it just makes the song and the progression so much more colorful and interesting. The first one of these 2 chords that we'll talk about is the flat 7 major chord. Late nights I can see the lust in her. Acid rain is the first photo. Skies open up, share a couple. Cracking seams, guilty nothing. Trip down the hill, strawberry fields. Are you even real? She said, tell me how you feel. So in order to find the flat 7 major chord in any key, just go down 2 half steps from the root note, the first note of the major scale that you're in. So if you're in the key of G, then you go down 2 half steps from the note G. So that makes it an F note, and then once you have that note, just build a major chord off of that. So it'd just be an F major chord. So in the key of G, right, it's that kind of sound. It's super, it has this strength to it. Now for this James Blake song, it's in the key of G major. Now all the music theory nerds out there just threw up in their mouth. So while they're cleaning themselves up, let me talk to the rest of you for a second, okay? So technically this song is in the key of E minor, not G major, because the chord progression pretty much starts and ends on the E minor chord, right? Do, 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 do. It has a minor tone to it for sure. Now the reason that I think of this song in the key of G major and not E minor is, one, because I just believe in simplicity and this helps simplify it. But also it makes sense if you think about it. So there's this thing called relative minor and relative major, right? I'm sure you've probably heard of those terms. See, here's the thing. The 6 chords, or the 6 basic essential chords in the key of E minor are like E minor, G major, A minor, B minor, C major, and D major. Guess what? Those are the exact 6 chords that are in the G major scale. You're just starting on the E minor instead of the G major, because the G major, same chords. You're just starting at the G instead of the E minor. Now this is important, and I want you to think about this, because the reason that I do it this way is not just because it's more simple, it's also because it creates consistency. Because if I hear the term 4 chord, I know what a 4 chord sounds like. And a 4 chord, at least in my simplistic brain, should sound like a 4 chord no matter what key you're in. The problem with thinking in terms of the minor key is the 4 chord in E minor is this chord. The 4 chord in G major is this chord. So which is going to be the 4 chord? Because if you're in E minor, this will be the 1, this will be the 2, this will be the 3, and this will be the 4, and so on. Are you seeing the problem here? So if you're always switching between thinking, in numbers from the minor key to the major key, you have 2 completely different sets of tones. And this is why I like to keep everything in the context of the major scale. So even if it's technically in a minor key, the 1 is still always that major chord. Right? It's never the minor chord, it's the relative major chord of that minor chord that is the 1 chord of the key that you're in. That way, no matter which key you're in, the tone quality and the sound of a 4 stays the same. The sound of a 5 chord stays the same. 6 chords, same thing. There's consistency if you think of it in this way, and it keeps things simple. So there's my little unconventional music theory lesson for the day. Now, if that confused you, and it probably did confuse some of you, and I do apologize for that, but if it did, then what you need to do is go check out my 20-minute essential music theory crash course. It's super to the point. There's no fluff or BS or arbitrary stuff that you don't need. This is just the essentials so that you can understand what a 5 chord is, what a 6 chord is, what are the relations between the minor chords and the major chords, what are the 6 chords in every key. That's a bonus with this lesson as well. So if you want a PDF laid out of the 6 chords, 6 chords in every single key, to where you can just point, okay, I want to do a 4, 3, 6, 5 chord progression, you can look on the chart and say, boom, that chord, that chord, that chord, that chord. And that's really going to help you out to get started, to get a springboard so that you can spend less time analyzing and more time creating and playing. So I'll leave a link in the description. It's absolutely free, so be sure to check that out if I confused you in any way with my rant earlier. So, all right, let's keep going. So that's the flat 7 major chord. The other alien chord is the 3 major chord, or you may recognize it as the 21 Pilots chord.
Please don't make any sudden moves. You don't know the half of the abuse. She said that I should change my clothes. I exaggerate the life we used to know. Slow down on Monday.
The 3 major chord works especially beautifully as almost a bridge chord between like a verse and a chorus, like I just showed you on the song Saturday.
The life we used to know. Slow down.
Now to find the 3 major chord is very simple. All you need to do is know the key that you're in, and then if you download my chart and download my music theory crash course, you'll get that with the crash course, is look for the 3 minor chord. Every key has a 3 minor chord. And then all you need to do is flip that and turn it into major. So this 21 Pilots song Saturday is in the key of G sharp, right? Slow down on Monday, my son, right? So we're in the key of G sharp. Now, when he gets to that 3 major at the end of that verse, what's the 3 minor? First, let's find the 3 minor in the key of G sharp. So if you look at on the chart, it will be G sharp is the 1, A sharp minor is the 2, and then C minor is the 3. So what we need to do is simply make that C minor into a C major, which obviously if you know the difference between major and minor, just raise the 3rd by half a step, and boom, there's the C major. So that is how you get this sound. Slow down, right? It's beautiful. All right, and the third way to write better chord progressions is a little sneaky, but yet very obvious, and it's simply this: write better melodies. See, I firmly believe that a chord progression is only as good as the melody that plays around that chord progression. So before we wrap this up, I just want to give you 3 quick tips on how to write better melodies and hence make your chord progressions better. See what I'm doing? Melody tip number 1 is contrast, contrast, contrast. This is so important. You want some element of contrast from the different sections of your song. You don't want to sound monotonous and static from start to end. You want variation, you need contrast, and that includes contrast in speed, so speeding up and slowing down. Contrast in how much you're filling up the space, so maybe leave more space in the verse and then have less space in the chorus where you're almost singing on every beat. This includes contrast in pitch, so maybe the verse is lower, the chorus higher, or vice versa. The verse higher and then you go into this groovy low chorus. It doesn't matter as much what it is that you're contrasting. It really matters that you do contrast to some degree. One example of this is Adele's incredible new song, Easy on Me. And pay attention to how the pre-chorus vocal melody has this tight rhythmic cadence about it, but then when the chorus hits, she releases into this floaty and straightforward style of melody.
But I can't bring myself to swim when I am drowning in this silence, baby. Let me in. Go easy on me, baby. I was still a child, didn't get the chance to.
Now let's listen to the classic indie song First by Cold War Kids and notice how the energy shifts from the verse to the chorus. You get this new swelling of energy that comes in when the chorus hits. Listen. So make sure that you're adding sufficient contrast to your song and to your melodies. Now there are exceptions to this rule, obviously, just like there are with every rule in music. But as a general rule of thumb, you definitely are going to want a good bit of contrast, and if you think you have enough, maybe try adding even more. Now melody tip number 2 to write better chord progressions is, and this is one that I struggle to remember and I struggle to do consistently, is leave room for the melody to breathe. You don't need every bar to be full of vocal melodies. Try letting the melody breathe and have these broad open spaces between vocal phrases. Instead of always trying to be singing something, take a step back and let there be some empty space. Let the mood evolve and develop instead of you always singing all the time. Listen to this Bon Iver song and notice how far apart and sparse the vocal melody arrangement is. Okay, and finally, melody tip number 3 is be conversational. This is one of the most overlooked things. If you're making modern music, pretty much any modern genre, whether that's pop or rock or folk, indie, anything, you have to sound conversational to a certain point. Unless you're singing classical or theater, then don't sound like you're singing classical or theater. You want to sound like you're having a conversation, like you're actually being authentically you. So here's something I want you to think about for the next song you write. Be intentional about speaking the melodies instead of singing them. Try it. Like, think conceptually, like, this is what I'm going to do. Think of it as speak your melody on pitch instead of singing it, right? You're still on pitch. You're still, it has a sing-songy quality about it, but you're speaking it on pitch. And that flips the brain, because if you tell your brain that you're going to speak, it's really hard for your brain then to sing in an inauthentic way, because that's what we're after. We're after authenticity. We're after finding what your individual voice sounds like, what you sound like if you're having a conversation through the avenue of music. And consciously trying to speak on pitch has a sneaky added benefit to it, in that it keeps you from trying to sound like other artists. And this is especially important for singer-songwriters who have minimal instrumentation and it's just their voice, and there's not a whole lot of backing tracks or anything like that. You have to be conversational if you want people to believe you. And that's what this all comes down to. Because if people don't believe you, if they don't feel like what you're projecting, if they don't feel like what you're communicating is believable, nobody's going to care. And nobody is going to think that it's a good song, because it doesn't feel authentic. It doesn't feel real. Now, Ed Sheeran is a prime example of this style of singing. Listen to these songs by Ed and really pay attention to how conversational he is with his delivery.
When your legs don't work like they used to before, and I can't sweep you off of your feet. When it gets hard, you know it can get hard sometimes. Baby, I'm dancing in the dark with you between my arms.
So, to wrap this up, I just want to encourage you to be you. Don't try to be another singer or another artist. You have to be authentically you. Now, that doesn't mean that you should settle for sounding terrible. That's not what I'm talking about. You always want to be growing and working on your voice and your music production and your arrangements. All these things. These are skills that grow and evolve as we age, as we practice, right? So I want you to think of both things at the same time. Be you while maximizing your potential. And that includes being inspired by other artists and whatnot, but you have to keep that balance of being authentically you, because if you lose this, you're done. No one's going to believe you, no one's going to care, and this is just so important. So keep that balance, and that's part of what I am here to help you with at the Indie Music Lab. So if you want to learn more about music theory and you want just the basic fundamentals, like I mentioned earlier in the video, I have a 20-minute music theory crash course, as well as the 6 chords in every key, the 6 essential chords in every key, a free PDF that comes with that as well, where you get this chart where you can easily reference and pinpoint which chords you should be playing for the song that you're doing in the key that you're in. So link is in the description. Go check it out. I think it's really going to be helpful for you. Thank you so much for watching. I know this went a little bit longer than some of my other videos do, but I really want to delve a little bit deeper than I generally do. So thanks so much for watching. Have an amazing day. Happy music.